Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Bridging the Gap, Geostationary and Non-Geostationary Synergy for Remote Connectivity. This webinar is supported by MEASAT. A bit of background, bridging the digital divide has been a target by governments and commercial players since the 1990s. Yet today, or 40 years later, the ITU has indicated that 2.6 billion people, or a third of the world's population, are still not connected to the internet. There are, of course, technology gaps, such as bandwidth provisioning, coverage, ecosystem development, and there are likewise, and perhaps more importantly, market gaps. This includes price, total cost of ownership, disposable income levels, and market access. We're entering into a new sphere of the satellite industry, and LEOs, particularly, or non-GEOs, have entered. Starlink is a market player that's very competitive. They have managed to gain 2 million subscribers in 3 short years. Our webinar will try to tackle some of these questions. Is Starlink, for example, the model by which the digital divide can be bridged? Geo players are looking at the competition, and they're looking at synergies as well. So to help us out, we have a distinguished group of panelists. We have Ganendra Selvaraj, Chief Commercial Officer of MEASAT, Bala Murali, Regional Director for Southeast Asia and the Pacific region for Eutelsat OneWeb, and finally, David Geiling, Vice President for Asia Pacific of Chimera. Gentlemen, welcome. So diving into it, Starlink, a very aggressive competitive player. Is this the model by which we bridge the digital divide via bridging technology and market gaps? Gan, please start us off.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, Jose, and thanks seeing this esteemed panel today. So for us, MEASAT, we have looked at the various non-geo services that are out there, and in December 2023, we signed up as a Starlink authorized reseller after extensive testing and discussions with Starlink. Of course, once we understood that it could fit our business operations, right? I wouldn't say Starlink is the model, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. It is a great product, and when we combine it with MEASAT's on-ground capabilities, we are really observing some useful business cases being enabled by our ConnectMe and enterprise product lines, right? And one clear-cut example of this is, MEASAT being able to now offer solutions globally, right? Whereas, as a regional player, we were always stuck in just being able to offer solutions over Asia. So this is something that definitely excites our enterprise customers. And we are looking actively at different ways to infuse more and more non-geo technologies into MEASAT's offerings. And Starlink will not be the last of it.
Oh, excellent. So in terms of how the market, I think how the industry perceived Starlink a year, 2 or 3 years ago, there were direct competition. Now, the industry, well, MEASAT, for instance, is looking at a co-opetition type of model. And you mentioned that this is the way forward, and not just for Starlink, correct?
Yes. There's plenty of room, I guess, in this big ocean of the world that, for us to cooperate and really, I think a service to a customer or a solution to a customer is more than just the technology itself, but also how you put together the entire service, right? End to end. The customer experience must be prioritized. And that's something that I think MEASAT can offer by putting together all these technologies together.
Great. Thank you. Bala, OneWeb and Eutelsat, you now have the synergy and the partnership. MEASAT has tried to do that with Starlink. What's your take in terms of, first of all, bridging the digital divide and the gaps that needs to be had in the marketplace? What's the offering that Eutelsat OneWeb brings to the table?
So I think when you start off about looking at a certain model to see is that the right way to attack this market. One of the things that I have found in the Asia Pacific market, at least, is it's an extremely price sensitive market. So when you go to the market with a high value product with low latency, high bandwidth, better visibility, better coverage, there is a question mark of what does the customer need really today? I mean, it's a bit like if you go back 20 years ago and you took a satellite handheld phone and went to the remote part of China and said, hey, would you like to use this? They've never seen a phone. They don't have any phone numbers to call. And then suddenly you've given them a phone and say, hey, call someone with it. And the guy goes, I don't need this because I have no one to call. So, that's one extreme example compared to what we're faced with today in terms of at what point is latency really clicking in, latency sensitive applications, and how much premium is someone willing to pay for that compared to what's available in your average Geo HDS kind of environment. So that's from a market perspective to see what value we can actually sort of assign to this low latency feature that we bring as OneWeb. But at the same time, if you go back to business models, there's one approach which is go big in the consumer market, because look, what are the barriers to entry? One of the main barriers to entry in the satellite industry is the actual cost of the equipment itself. If you can bring that down to a very negligible amount, or sub 1,000 with massive subsidies, if that's what it takes, and if you have deep enough pockets, you can do that. And then you go to the market with a consumer offering, build up your customer base, and then you start focusing on the enterprise values because you already have a base to build on. That's another, that's one approach. I mean, we have seen this in the automotive industry, for example, with some, from someone who's like a, mass market company, then just go and, on top of their mass market product, they narrow it down and then focus on high value brands. Toyota's done that, Nissan's done that. So these are examples in other industry that I'm sure people have learned from in the satellite industry as well.
Okay.
The challenge we have, as I said, yes, multi-orbit is clearly the way forward because there is no one answer to dealing with everything. There are price sensitive markets, there are coverage sensitive markets, and there are latency sensitive markets. So coverage comes no matter what. If you're in the satellite industry, whether you are LEO or GEO, coverage is like the baseline offering. Then you start thinking about how do I differentiate and say, this is a customer that will definitely benefit from a low latency offering. And this is a customer for whom GEO can be a failover solution. And this is a customer where GEO is the primary and LEO is a failover solution. And we have all the three scenarios that we are currently looking at. So we have, the LEO-GEO combined offer is really one that OneWeb Eutelsat is focusing on with regard to the mobility sector. So maritime, aviation, these are markets we know for sure the LEO-GEO combination is going to work, where we need the coverage capability of a GEO. Because as you know, by the sheer design of the OneWeb low latency LEO platform, you need to have many gateways. And you can't put gateways in the middle of the ocean. So you need that extra bridge using a GEO to give that extra coverage. And the same goes for the aviation industry. But on land, there are multiple strategies we're looking at, whether it's a combination of LEO and GEO or LEO as a primary, GEO as secondary, or vice versa. So it's a very broad question, and it really varies based on the different market segments we're looking at.
Okay, great, thank you. Speaking of technology, the enabling technology and one that the industry is looking for is antenna systems. So, David, what's your take on this? In order to, again, bridge the digital divide, Bada talked about other markets, enterprise mobility, the antenna component of this whole digitization. What's your take in terms of going forward with GEO and not GEO?
Yeah, so I think there's a few comments. One is, when we're talking about antennas, you can talk about an antenna that's GEO only, that's LEO only, or a hybrid antenna, and then what's the relevant place for those in various sectors of the market. So you can look at mil-gov, you can look at enterprise, you can look at consumer. And so looking at it from a terminal point of view, so Kymeta has taken a decidedly enterprise military government approach. So and the way, and I'd say on LEO, and partner with Mayasat on GEO. And one of the ways we look at requirements, or what requirements do we go after, it's an analysis of something akin to wearing a soft cap versus a hard hat. So, you know, if I need a hat just to keep the sun off my head, I don't need to invest in a hard hat. But if I'm working at a construction site, that's, you know, what happens to personnel safety or loss, it's then I would wear a hard hat. So it's similar conceptually that a consumer-based or light enterprise-based solution would be good in sort of the analogous situations of keeping the sun out of your eyes, but might not be the right solution if you have heavy-duty machinery lifting a ton of dirt that's vibrating, because the consumer terminals and even the lower end enterprise-ish terminals don't really have the stability to in wiring and cabling to support that. So that's maybe one comment. Is another comment is what we're seeing in MilGov on the other hand, when we're talking about LEO. So I sort of contrasted with the first point was to contrast with enterprise versus consumer. Second point is about the use of split multi-orbit systems. In fact, what's called PACE now, which stands for Primary Alternative Contingency and Emergency Systems, has become doctrine for U.S. and allied Department of Defenses or Ministry of Defenses, and that actually the requirements going forward are for multi-orbit satellites for the MilGov, and I'm starting to see that in Asia Pacific region as well, where even a few months ago I could have had good talks about GEO only or LEO only, but now a lot of the MODs only want to talk about multi-constellation. So when we're looking at military sales, I think you need to have multi-constellation, and they provide not only diversity, but also even in a tactical setting, you can't use both for the same purposes. So, for example, you can with a GEO satellite, you can park a vehicle to the, let's say if you're in the northern hemisphere, to the south side of a building and be relatively hidden and transmit to a satellite. But with LEO constellations, you need to have the line of sight from 30 degrees to 30 degrees. So tactically, it's a bit more challenging. The other thing on MilGov sales is, as important as path diversity is ability for mobility, and so the mobile C2 has also taken precedence, and so it's having the mobility with the path diversity that's very essential. And again, that's something we address very well. And then maybe a third point just to bring up, when we're talking about rolling out of networks, and again contrasting Starlink and with other networks, and you're based in the Philippines, Jose. I think what I've been told by several, not only one source but many people, is that Starlink started off with, particularly in terms of looking at some government applications, started off very, there was no contention on the network. It was the government users were very happy. And then as the network's contention rose, and the fact it's not a CIR network, that the level of dissatisfaction increased to the point where the government realized, well, that's actually not the appropriate solution for what we need on the government side. The other thing to keep into account and related to that is spectrum is limited, and OneWeb in many cases has priority of filing for LEO spectrum. And so today, where OneWeb's not deployed, there's not going to be much pressure on the spectrum coordination side. But as OneWeb deploys more and more, the other constellations will have to, that are LEO constellations, will have to give precedence to OneWeb in many cases. So I think that's, what might be a good situation now might not be a good situation or the ideal situation, particularly on the enterprise side, as more and more constellations get deployed and more of the spectrum's used up.
Great, excellent points. So it looks like it's not a winner take all. We've heard before, especially with the cadence of Starlink being competitive, the vertically integrated, etc. Big funds backing them up. And as you mentioned, and as Bala mentioned as well, you wear different hats. You attack certain verticals a certain way. Some solutions aren't fit for certain applications. So you need geo and non-geo, and maybe other solutions as well, even fiber, terrestrial. Gan, having said that, from Measat's point of view, going forward in terms of your strategy, in terms of going to market. So you mentioned that Starlink enables you to go global now. We've got Kuiper coming in about 2 years, very short time frame. OneWeb is available. You said you were open to that. And, Terasat, Mangara, Rivada, and others, Iris, are coming in. So now that we have all these players at your disposal with all massive supplies, and not all LEOs are created equal, with the lay of the land going forward for Measat, what's the go-to strategy in 2, 3, 4 years?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Jose. So, I mean, if you just take a very high-level view, what we look when we look for synergies between geo and non-geo, we can see our geos regionally focused, able to provide widespread coverage. And one of the things that we see non-geos complementing is to densify capacity in the areas that we need it most, right? So one example that we are already deploying now is in our Connect Me Now network. The Connect Me Now is a community Wi-Fi network, basically already connecting about 500,000 Malaysians to date, right? And some of these locations, there's high demand, there's high traffic, and we are actually actively now deploying Starlink into those locations in a SD-WAN kind of environment to densify capacity into that area or into that particular location, right? So I am very sure that all these other LEO providers, one way or another, will provide advantages, whether it's cloud computing or whether it's better latency. And from Measat's point of view, what we would do is evaluate each of these solutions and apply it for like a fit for purpose kind of applications, right? And I think there is a role for all of them to play together with the 24/7 and customized services that Measat offers. You can really meet the end customer's tailor-made requirement, right? And that's essentially the idea. Again, there was a point brought up earlier. I think Starlink does not have a CIR network. Yeah, it does not offer SLAs today, but again, a hybrid combination of a GEO and LEO solution like the ones that we are offering now in the market now will come with an SLA, right? So that's something also enterprise customers look for, and stakeholders are more comforted when they see these type of products, right?
Okay, so there's complementarity there in terms of, again, the topic is synergy. So it's the CIR component that you bring to the table, and I guess it's the bandwidth provisioning that they bring to the table. So together, you've got that very competitive solution for the customer. Makes sense. You mentioned that you're willing to partner with others. OneWeb is in our webinar now. Is OneWeb in your radar that you can work with as well?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, definitely all the LEO providers are in our radar. We'd like to evaluate them one by one as and when they mature. Of course, there are regulatory constraints and there's business model constraints. These all need to be assessed one by one. And to those that fit our business operations, we'll take them on board.
Great.
Of course, Bala, with the other partner willing.
Right. So, Bala, any comments on what Gan said? Are you a willing
Absolutely.
partner?
I mean, OneWeb, without a doubt, I mean, it's no secret we are very interested in partnering with very capable players like Measat. Because I mean, the interesting thing with Measat is they're not just a owner and operator of a satellite, but they're also distributing other services. They're packaging other solutions together. So there is real value in partnering with people like Measat for OneWeb. That goes without saying. I think just to add to what Gan said, I think the whole value proposition of combining both MEO and LEO and the GEO into your offering to the enterprise market is this whole total cost of operation that you alluded to before, which is you can today with the right negotiations with the manufacturers bring your HTS costs. I mean, geo HTS costs down to almost $15 to $18 per megabit per second, whereas the LEOs are at much higher price points than that. So one of the ways that we need to try to make this work is to actually come up with combined solutions to your enterprise customers. Now, it's not just about the cost, as Gan pointed out as well, and we are painfully aware of the situation. That is, no matter how good your solution is, you also have to contend with the local regulatory environment, geopolitical situation, which inhibits you from going into certain markets which are lucrative and which are probably ideal for us. So this is not just a pure technology game. Right? I mean, I know for a fact from Malaysia itself, there's sufficient ambiguity in the way the rules are interpreted about who can enter the market. Do you need a gateway? Do you need a POP? Do you need a hub? And it's not just a Malaysian situation. This is the same in multiple countries, just alone in the Asia Pacific region. I see this, the winner here is going to be someone who can actually get the optimum solution between user terminal pricing, subsidies, gateway locations, regulatory environment, and not to mention frequency. Yes, you have an advantage as OneWeb because we're one of the early filers for the KU band frequency in the LEO segment. However, not every country recognizes that as no matter what the ITU says, there are still local rules and regulations to be followed, which can completely stump you if you're not fully compliant with the local setup. Now, that being said, if you have other influence you can bring to the market, like some of the larger competitors of OneWeb can do, that makes it, gives them a bit of an advantage because, I can't offer to do other than offer OneWeb LEO services in a particular market. And that is basically all I'm offering. Whereas, if you go with complementary solutions besides that, then certain governments and certain regulators might find it more attractive than just, a satellite communication solution. So it's a complete mishmash of things that we need to consider when we want to play in this region.
Yes, please, David, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I would add to Bala's and Gan's points rather that there's also let's say competitive views between nations, and if every other nation's adopting hybrid LEO GEO solutions, I think sooner or later that energy or that momentum does affect other nations. I mean, we've seen that with multiple technology rollouts in the course of our respective careers. So I completely agree with Bala that there's some significant ambiguity in markets and obstacles which would arise for someone just providing satellite or just providing a terminal, that you wouldn't get faced by someone who can provide multiple solutions that could make a more more interesting. But I also think there's a, I remember when different mobile technologies were rolling out, like GSM versus CDMA versus AMPS back in the 90s and early 2000s. And GSM is what won out as it became more and more the world standard. And I think we're going to see, again, from the vantage point I have, first you see military MODs adopting the multi-orbit solution as a necessary part of their defense communications. And then I think you go from that to higher end enterprise, because also on a consumer level, to use multi-orbits very expensive. You wouldn't even consider it today. But I think it lays what happens in the defense sector and then later in higher end enterprise lays the groundwork for eventually what can be rolled out to consumers as more innovation comes into the market.
Okay. All three of you, I think, agree that it's not a simple dynamic, right? We've got technology issues to deal with. We've got market challenges. We have regulatory. So what's the more challenging of the three? I'll start with you, David, being the technologist. At least you're wearing that technology hat now. Is the technology challenge greater than the market or regulatory, or is one more challenging than the other?
To me, they're all essential pieces of the puzzle that need to be solved, because without any of the three that you mentioned, you don't really have a business. And so you can have the greatest technology and greatest network, and as Bala indicated, into the market from a local regulatory point of view, it really doesn't matter. So, but on the other hand, you could have a very regulatorily, if that's the way to say it, flexible market, that where it's quite easy, it's low barriers to access. And to use a very obvious, but you don't. But also, another point you didn't raise is there also has to be critical mass in terms of the market. So why aren't any of us looking at an initial rollout into Vanuatu or Oceania, Micronesia? Is because you don't get the critical mass there in terms of GDP per capita, where you could justify putting up a constellation depth. So maybe it would be an add-on at a later point, but you're focusing OneWeb's. I mean, Bala, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm pretty sure you're focusing on very highly populous nations as your first go-to-market with somewhat realistic barriers to entry that you can overcome or realistically overcome. And then I guess Gan, same for you guys as well, where your energies, even when you're thinking about it globally, it's probably where you're going to have critical mass. And so part of it's not just having the right technology, right regulatory. It's also having the addressable market in terms of critical mass for a market. And so I think, one of the points you raised originally, Jose, was this question of the digital divide. And that's, I think that's where the big challenge is how do you overcome that where you have either very low GDP to support. So even if the technology, the network and the regulatory is okay, if you can't somehow create harmony with the local socioeconomic situation, it's also a significant barrier for the technology to go forward.
Okay. God, he doesn't want to speak for you. So do you agree? You're going after the densely populated areas and the high value verticals. Is that correct? Or
well, yes and no. I think ultimately it is determined by market demand, right? That's probably where you see things that once there is market demand, then all the other things, whether it's technology, regulatory, they will usually, industry finds a way to get through those matters, right? But yes, I think where we're looking at it is that, so even in the context of Malaysia, like we can provide access with geo satellites as low as $2 to an end consumer today, right? That's what we do with our Connect Me Now community Wi-Fi service, and there's plenty of demand once you reach that sort of points, and we can make the business model work, right? So geos still have a large role in enabling universal access, because the cost of the per bit, or the cost of terminals are still low. Now, how do you now improve quality, and how do you create more use cases in communities? I think that also in turn creates more demand, and that's where I think the non-geo solutions come and take a role, right? And you have to start chipping away at it, start creating that environment where these use cases can mature, and in a way stimulate that demand in some of these markets, and sooner enough you'll find that that will dictate that there's more consumption of capacity in the likes of us satellite industry players. And in Asia, particularly, you can see that the consumption of data capacity is just phenomenal, right? So I think that leads and trumps everything else.
Okay, so yeah, three of you agree, and I agree as well, that 3 or 4 pieces of the puzzle have to come together. If I take technology though, and the technology is, let's say, non-geo, right? Does it usher in market demand and regulatory openness? So for example, Starlink came in, and no, I don't mean to plug Starlink, but a technology came in that enables you higher bandwidth, that enables you lower price, maybe not quite total cost of ownership, and then you get synergies. When the market sees this and they say, okay, with a hybrid solution, I can offer a use case with a favorable price point. And then the regulators took notice and said, that's a good solution. I will redraft my regulations to open up the market. So is technology the key here, or is it, because disposable income will remain the same, right? For countries like the Philippines, we can't afford, $50, $99 per month. It's probably in the area of $20 per month. But if the technology enables you to afford that, does that begin to solve the puzzle? Gan, with you first.
Yeah, surely I think technology helps to solve the puzzle, but like in anything in its infancy, I would say that governments, and it's the right move, is to tread cautiously, right? To tread cautiously, to see what is this all about. Does it impact my people? Will it impact my country? Will it impact sovereignty? These are all things that governments are concerned about, right? And we see that. So and in our discussions with arms of the government, and there's still a case for truly private networks, which geo satellites can do today for a country, and that will, I think, continue to exist until the point where there's more acceptance, as David mentioned earlier, to this multi-orbit type of concepts, right? So I think as an industry, we play a role to facilitate this, guide our customers in what environments they should go fully geo, and in which environments it makes more sense for them to go multi-orbit or just fully non-geo. I think the data, will the proof is in the pudding, right? Once the data comes out. I joke with some people who tell me, the current non-geo solutions, sometimes people don't ask about, what happens when it rains. They just assume that it will work, but actually it works at the same frequencies that the traditional geo players have been using all the while. And that gives you an example that you need to educate the customers what these new products are, what advantages it gives them, and whether or not it makes sense for them to move or stay on the current networks.
Bala, OneWeb got a lot of traction from the Indian government and the UK government. So in terms of regulatory, right, it looks like the Indian government and the UK Space Agency saw OneWeb and said, that's an interesting proposition. I'm going to invest in that. And the market access, at least for the UK and India, and specifically India, everybody's watching for regulations, seem to be there. So same question to Gan. Does the technology open up solutions for the other market challenges like disposable income levels, regulatory? Does having OneWeb with Eutelsat, and I'm sure you have discussions with various governments, make it easier for market access?
Yeah, so it's a. Sorry, is this question to me or to Gan?
To you, Bala. Yep.
So I think you're right. We have seen this in some of the markets that we are operating in, where the regulator is actively looking to modify the market, the licensing regime to allow the existence of LEO players. Obviously because the geos generally, they talk about sovereignty as well as data security and all that sort of stuff. With LEO, to achieve that, you have to start thinking outside the box, because you can't be going around. As the nature, the design of the system is that it's global. If every country says I want a gateway and I want a POP, then you'll be planting up close to 200 gateways all over the world, and it is not a sustainable, financially viable. So the regulators have started improving on that, and it's a combination of technology and the regulatory requirement and what the customer needs at the end of the day as well. And in order to make sure that we get the right latency, the advantage of the latency, you also need to look at what's the best way to land the traffic and deliver it to the end customer. So yes, so for example, OneWeb is going to be ready in the Asia Pacific region. We are going to be ready. We're already there in about a third of the markets, and by the end of June, beginning of July, we plan to be fully covering all of the Asia Pacific region. But we are not going to be immediately able to get the full benefit of it if all the regulators don't play ball in the same way. We're confident that we have met or in the process of meeting all the regulatory requirements in the region. Like you said, getting market access to countries like India is a big deal, because it's a large population, it's a complicated market traditionally, and to be able to convince them that we are actually bringing value to the country, looking at what countries like Indonesia are doing, they have this whole digital inclusion or financial inclusion policy, which is driving all of the regions to make sure that their citizens are connected to the banking networks of the world, the education networks of the world, so that they can get the benefit of the subject matter, which is actually the way I think the world should evolve. So you're driven by the need, and then the technology comes to support it. And then comes the question, what kind of technology do you need to support what kind of requirement? And then you will find the regulators will actually be forced, or they'll be motivated to come up with regulation that supports that kind of technology. I mean, ideally for me, if I can sit here and say, David, just give me a $500 terminal and I'll get the entire market. I mean, I know David would love to do that, but he's still working on it. But if we get to that day, when we can have that barrier to entry completely taken out, then it's purely a price and regulatory game. There's nothing else. I mean, it's as Gan said, if you have the capability to deliver capacity at $2, if you connect a user at $2, you will find every home will want to have that connection. I mean, why wouldn't you, right? It's a way to stay connected forever. But then with limited capacity, like what we have at OneWeb, and the time limits, because a GEO will last 15 years, normal LEO lasts around 8 years, and then you have the constraints, and also the critical mass. I mean, if I ask David, give me the $500 terminal, he's going to say, look, I don't think we have enough to cover the cost. I mean, microchip costs are going up. There's lots of little factors at play here, and you're right. I mean, we're constantly going after one challenge after another, right? It's never going to be, we've achieved everything. And even with the mighty Starlink, as you pointed out, they've got their own challenges as well to get into the various markets that we need to get into.
Just a quick follow-up. Hypothetically, if the playing field was level, sorry, David, if the regulations were open, I'm sure we're not going to get there, but hypothetically, if the governments open up, like in Australia, for instance, and you can play equal, even you have market access, would the price points, disposable income level issues, technology, the $500 terminal from David, would that follow fairly easily? So if the world were to open up, right? Regulations open, go ahead and play. David can now plan his terminal pricing. You can go after the disposable income challenge, and you can price it at $5. So if regulations were favorable, does that also solve the technology and market issue? Just very quickly, Bala.
I think it gives the technologists the motivation then to aggressively go after the market, because the point is, sometimes once we commit the investment, then we are kind of locked in for a significant period of time. Okay, we're slightly better than a geo satellite where you have 15 years to improve. Whereas with LEO, we can go faster and bring out, better satellites and higher throughput and so on and so on. It definitely gives us the motivation at that point to go after aggressively, because the problem we have now is, even if we have global coverage, we can have terabits per second raining over us. We're going to have to take the model of a low-cost airline versus a commercial airline. If my aircraft is flying empty, I want to sell it at $2 if I have to, right? To make sure that I'll fill up my aircraft. So we cannot have that model at the moment because of the regulatory constraints. If those constraints are lifted, then it's a pure, yield management, right? Yield optimization game at that. Assuming, of course, David gives me the $500 terminal.
We'll get to David in a second. Gan, you're nodding your head. I guess you agree, right? If regulations were level playing field, technology will solve this issue of market access and disposable income levels.
Yeah, I think for sure it will definitely help. But regulations are also there to protect other parts of industries, making sure we as a satellite industry, we are kept in check as well. It usually works out for the best, when we look at the grand scheme of things. So agreed. Definitely, if regulatory frameworks are favorable for the satellite industry, that would be good. But again, when it comes to spectrum itself, there's a broader question, and the broader question is what technology gives the most efficient use of that spectrum, right? And I think that regardless whether it's satellite, mobile, or whatever other technology, that should always win, if you ask me.
Okay, well, that's another webinar altogether. That's an hour topic at least. So, David, you mentioned you have that $500 terminal? Is that correct?
Not at all. But we're also, we're also we're a B2B business. So again, since this is a satellite conference, would you use a consumer IRD in your cable head-end? And that's the difference in the business. No one's going, oh, there's a very low cost consumer IRD. I'm going to put that in my cable head-end to manage a business that's generating $5 million a month. You're not going to do that. And so Bala's right. There's a price point issue, but there's also identifying and understanding what market you're going after. And when you're going after MilGov, when you're going after enterprise that requires CIR, they're not going to pay for CIR and then say, oh, but we want crappy equipment. And so it's the nature of what kind of customer are you selling to. So we don't, we'd love to have a $500 terminal, but we'll get there through evolved process. So for example, when I joined Kymeta, we had a product called the U7, which let's say could do this, but cost this much. And then we rolled out with the U8 GEO, which could do this, but cost this much. And now we have U8 LEO, which can do this in terms of throughput and latency, but costs this much. And so, at least from our point of view, and what's been driving that, one is evolution of technology, and as we're able to continue to innovate from the basis of the metamaterial technology we use, and the other is volume. So before the days of OneWeb rolling out, we were selling hundreds. We'd ship hundreds of terminals. Now we're shipping thousands with OneWeb partially deployed. And so as we go into these, I mean, this is actually the first company I worked for where we had the J curve, like you'd see in business school. But as we go more into volume, our costs come down, and we're able to pass that on to our partners and to the market. So, yeah. So, and again, I think you'd see that you can have something analogous in the broadcast industry where you say initially, broadcasting was large C-band dishes going to cable head ends, and then finally technology developed a point to where you could have small 60 centimeter, 80 centimeter dishes going to very cheap to homes all over a coverage area for DTH. So I think you'll see a similar sort of evolution, if that answers your question.
It does.
But one more point I'll raise, because it hasn't been raised, and we're talking about Asia here, and Asia, I think, where the real excitement, and I shouldn't say it's the only excitement, but where one of the really exciting areas going to be is in maritime, because virtually every country in Southeast Asia, in Asia, minus landmass Asia, every country is an archipelago. And so I think the fact, and the countries that aren't archipelago, almost every country has access to sea. And so shipping, leisure, defense-related, maritime, I think that's a very, my guess is we're going to see a big explosion in that area with LEO services and with low-cost flat panel antennas.
Okay, and I agree with you. When we talk about technology, right? And I think, David, you mentioned this. Back in the 90s, there was a battle between CDMA and GSM. So two standards, one around. In our industry, we have standards, like we're part of the 5G forum now. But everybody else, in terms of equipment, is a closed system, right? So Starlink is vertically integrated. They're going to produce their own terminals. Kuiper's going to do the same. Viasat's going to do the same. But as Gan and Bala mentioned earlier, they do want to cooperate, right? So Gan is using Starlink. He's going to go talk to OneWeb with Bala, maybe the other players as well, Telesat, et cetera, et cetera. But you've got all these proprietary networks in the mix. That makes it expensive for GAN. Do we need to be now based on open standards as opposed to closed proprietary standards to be able to compete with the giants like Starlink and Kuiper? David, you first.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's actually, this is one of the, and you hit the nail on the head, Jose. It's one of the frustrating things about the satellite industry, and OneWeb's one of the notable exceptions to that rule, where they've actually, okay, the modem's closed, but at least on the terminal side, they said, okay, may the best company win. And the problem is yeah, you can't. The sooner, I don't know. We understand, coming from satellite industry, that when VSAT rolled out, there was all these proprietary VSAT networks. What's a shame is that as LEO rolls out, they're also all proprietary networks. So you can't get the massive economies of scale that you would need to make it truly a mass business. So so the fact that the networks are proprietary definitely has an impact on how our industry grows.
Okay, Bala, any comments for that?
Yeah, no, it's as David mentioned, it's a critical issue, and we are trying to align around certain standards like 3GPP. We're trying to do what we can as an industry. I'm not sure everyone thinks the same way, but OneWeb is trying to do that. Because at the moment, all of that integration is left with the user terminal manufacturers, right? So David's going to make one that works with the Geo and a certain type of Leo. If you want him to work with two types of Leos, then he'll need to come up with a terminal that's capable, and that eventually puts the price of the terminal up. And then you're back to square one again. Absolutely agree with you. I think if there are standardizations possible, that would be great. But I think in the early stages, as with any industry, everyone's going to try and carve out their niche and see who ultimately becomes the standard, right? So that's exactly where we're at now in the Leo space. Hopefully, it'll so that there'll be some common grounds that we can come to and then start standardizing. It would definitely ultimately lead to lower costs, more efficiencies and also more efficient use of the spectrum as well as we go into that space.
Okay. Gone. I'm sure you'll agree because you want to integrate all the solutions, right? But will it realistically happen? Starlink's not going to do it. Kuiper probably is not going to do it. So you probably have OneWeb, Telesat, Iris maybe from Europe. Not sure about Mangata and Vivada. What do you think? Is the standardization ever going to happen, or maybe in a limited scale?
Yeah. Well,
What do you think?
I think it's already happening at a limited scale, if you will. So at least from what we can see with our engagements is that at least things are on an IP network based. So with using IP as a common standard, you're able to do, I would say 80-90% of the things that we want to achieve. It's already possible. Now, so like what the other two gentlemen pointed out, I think interoperability will have to come at some point of time. Not yet, while people are just dipping their feet, getting experience with what non-geos can provide. We really only have a few experiences today, right? And I think time will tell, probably only in another 5-10 years before you start to get to a Google or a Microsoft approach where one is more open standards and one is more proprietary. But I think time essentially will tell.
Okay, all right. We're almost at our time limit. So just for me, in terms of lots of takeaways, it seems like technology is getting us there. Leo and non-geo definitely is good for the market. It's good for everyone in this panel. It's leading to regulators looking at the solution set and leading to a sort of tweak in terms of opening up their markets. It's leading to the market itself getting more affordable solutions, so disposable income levels, total cost of ownership, price points, etc. And the value chain is improving. So in a way, with the entrance of Leos and Starlink, Kuiper, Telesat, etc., it's good for the market. Still lots of pieces for the puzzle to really come together. Regulatory being a major one, technology again in terms of volumes for economies of scale, and the market just needs to improve. Anything that I missed? This is now your final closing remarks. And if there's anything I missed in terms of takeaways and what you would like to add in terms of the synergies that Leos bring to the table in the overall energy landscape, let's begin with you, David. Closing remarks.
No, I first of all, thank you, and thank you, Ganas, and your team as well for the invitation to join. And it's been a pleasure to be on the panel with everyone. I think 2024 is going to be a very exciting year. As Bala indicated, OneWeb should have full coverage by beginning of calendar Q3, and I think that's the time that the execution of the relationships we're doing today is going to really show itself. And I have the benefit of being able to see how just because I work for a global company, as does Paula, we have the benefit of seeing how the rollout of OneWeb in other markets paired with Geo is helping the industry grow. And again, one thing I haven't said, our growth in Geo terminal sales has not abated. It keeps growing. So we haven't flatlined on Geo. We're not going down. We're growing on Geo terminals as well. So Geo, I think if anything, what I see is we're in an age now where satellite's sexy again, satellite's cool again, and there'll be some that says, hey, we need consumer satellite, we'll go for that, but it'll also stimulate some saying, hey, we need satellite more for enterprise, but we need low latency, or hey, we need enterprise but large coverage area. And so or in a single beam. So you have, I think it just permits all of the industry to develop having the rollout of the NGSO networks. It's a benefit for all of us.
Non-geos are a good thing. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Bala, yeah. Bala, your closing remarks, please.
Thanks for that. Yeah, non-geos are a good thing, absolutely. And we're looking forward to, as David mentioned, it's a very important year for OneWeb. We're in that year when we are sort of materializing all of the partnership relationships that we have built, and we hope to be fully covering Asia Pacific from about July time. And it's not without its challenges, and I have mentioned most of them. It is about market access, it's about frequencies, there's all those things that are over and above what is within our control. But with that said, I think there's great opportunities ahead for us. We really think that we finally have the chance to fully meet the digital divide challenge that we've been faced with for many years, with the combination of Eutelsat and OneWeb, where we can actually bring the best for the benefits of GEO and LEO. The merger has been completed. The teams are now together. Technologies are slowly coming together. So actually, we're really looking forward to what comes up in this coming year. Thank you very much for inviting us to participate in this. Gan, David, it's been a pleasure being on this panel with you.
Great. Good luck with the future plans, Bala. And finally, Dan, your final points, please, closing remarks.
Yeah, so for us, the value proposition, whether it's GEO, non-GEO, it's just not just speed and latency, right? It's really about the service. And we're honestly in Miasat truly excited about this hybrid GEO, non-GEO type of environment. Really, I think it's come to a point where you can really offer redundancy, flexibility to reach diverse regions for our customers, lower costs through these economies of scale that, this kind of shared networks will really bring to the end customer, right? So the key is, that this is going to be a more holistic environment. The satellite industry can provide a more holistic solution to end customers now, and also unlock much more business opportunities than previously we have, right? So it's genuinely going to be an exciting time, and we are very happy to be part of that journey, and I look forward to the years to come, right? And also thank you, Jose, for hosting this, and to Bala and David, it's good having you on this panel. Very happy to share it with you.
Excellent. Well, my takeaway, as you all mentioned, non-geos are a good thing. It's going to be dynamic. 2024 is going to be an exciting year. Fully agree. Thank you, David, Bala, and Don for the panel. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you very much. To our audience, please look forward to more APSCC webinars. And thank you once again, panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. See you.
Thank you, Jose. See you.